Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining today. My name is Bill, and this is TAM Lab 115, going multi-cloud with Aria Operations, or formerly known as vRealize Operations. So Aria Operations at the Enterprise Edition has some capabilities to actually start monitoring and managing public cloud hyperscaler infrastructure, which is fantastic. So as we go multi-cloud with our customers, we have the ability to not only get observability for our on-prem infrastructure, traditionally vSphere, as well as hyperscalers like Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure, right? So we have all these different options. So let's go ahead and jump right in to Aria Operations and take a look at what that looks like. All right, so we're logged in here. This is version 8.10 of Aria Operations, or again, formerly vRealize Operations. So you'll see that here. Aria Operations has the ability to integrate with a number of sources. The traditional one is going to be vSphere, but if we take a look at all of our different options, I'll go ahead and add an account. You can see that we can integrate with our VMC and AWS solution, AWS, Azure, all over the place. I'm going to focus today's session on AWS and Azure. But again, you can see, like if you have GCP, for example, you can do that here as well. Or AVS as another option. So let's go ahead and start with AWS. It has the longest lead time, and I'll explain that as we go. So first up, let's hop over to AWS. So this is my tenancy inside of AWS, and I'm under the IAM section, so Identity and Access Management, and specifically under users. So we're going to create a user that's effectively a service account. So we're not going to have a human logging into this account, but we're going to leverage it to go between system and system. So let me go ahead and add this new user. And I'm going to call this vRops integration. Oops, excuse me. Now, again, this is going to be programmatic access. So think service account, not human. So I'm going to go ahead and select this access key option. Now, from a permissions perspective, IAM, you can check this out. These are the docs themselves on the VMware doc site. There's a lot of permissions you can set, and that's very advantageous for managing an AWS infrastructure. There are many options that you can choose, and that's called out here. So this is an example set of permissions. I want to call out, though, that we have linked to various documentation types and role types within AWS itself. So if you want read-only access for EC2, or maybe read-only access for Lambda or DynamoDB, you can add those here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here and I'm going to pick attach existing policies directly. And you'll see these little orange boxes pop up. These are going to be provided through AWS. Now, I'm going to filter on this because there are 791, you can see here, policies available just out of the box. I'm going to go ahead and search for read-only access. Now let's give this just a second for all the scroll bars to rebuild themselves. And you can see we're going to scroll all the way to the bottom to this one here called read-only access. So this is a higher level role that gives me access to many of these different objects and services within AWS. I'm going to go ahead and select this one. Now, again, you think about your customers or your environment to determine if you need more granular permission, because you can craft your own permissions here, or you can cobble it together from maybe some existing read-only access or other permissions you've defined. But for me, I'm going to do read-only access, and I'm going to move on. You can add tags for what I'm doing here. Tags don't make any sense for me, so I'm going to go ahead and hit next, and then create user. Now, what this does is creates my user account, but also gives me an access ID and a secret key. And so this is what we're going to use to set up the integration with AWS. So let's go ahead and capture these because it's going to be important here in just a minute. Go ahead and close this now. And that's it. So we've set it up on the AWS side. I'm going to go ahead and go back into Aria Operations right now, and let's go ahead and set up this integration. So back here from the integration screen, I'm going to go ahead and hit Add Account, and that's how we got to here with all these tiles. I'm going to pick AWS. Let's give it a name. Now, we can pick the different services that we want to monitor. And there are reasons why. Depending on your public cloud solution, you might actually be charged to do some of this monitoring. So you'll have to be aware and do a little bit of research to make sure that you're monitoring what you should and you understand the financial impact. For what I'm doing, I'm just going to leave it at all services. But again, you can see if we scroll through here, there's a lot of different services that we could filter this to. And keep in mind, too, that depending on the size of your estate, pulling multiple regions and pulling multiple services that you actually don't have could actually increase the load on the Aria Operations side as well. And so this could help you also limit resource utilization. So again, I'm going to keep all services in all regions. I'm going to go ahead and provide my credentials. So I have one in here already pre-made, we'll call it TAM Lab, but I'm going to edit these credentials with the new pieces of information I just grabbed. I'm going to grab my access key and then my secret key. Okay. So the last thing I want to do is open up this advanced settings. And we have some options in here to further tune this integration. One of which is actions enabled. So if I look at the I here, it's going to call out that this permits actions that can be run on an AWS resource from within vRealize Operations or Aria Operations. Now recall that I picked a user with permissions that were read only. So I actually can't perform any actions. So I'm going to go ahead and hit false here. Again, depending on your permissions, you might actually be able to enable Aria Operations here to do something for you in AWS. But for me, I'm going to leave this just like that. I'm going to go ahead and hit validate connection. And it's checking my different IDs and whatnot. And hey, there you go. It worked. It was successful. So I'll go ahead and hit OK here and then hit add. And there you go. Now you can see that we have AWS in here. It's going to show as a warning as we're not actually doing collection yet. The collection services are starting, and per our documentation with AWS, it can take up to about 10 minutes for this to really get going. So I wanted to start with AWS first and give it time to bake. So we'll come back and check on AWS after we're done with Azure. All right, so next we're going to go set up Azure. So let's take a quick look. I've logged into my tenancy here on Azure. And so we're going to start by going into Azure Active Directory. And again, we're going to do something very similar to AWS, where we're creating effectively a service account for a system to log in on and not a human. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is, again, I went into Azure Active Directory. Let's go to app registrations. And in here, we're going to create a new app registration. And let's give it a name like TAM Lab vRops integration. And now we're going to say it's restricted to just accounts in this organizational directory, right? Default, it's fine. But again, knowing you and your environment, you might want to check something else here. I'll go ahead and hit register. And now we've created this application. All right, so I'm going to grab a couple pieces of information right here. So I need this client ID. Let's go ahead. And then I need the tenant ID. Okay, now, because again, we need to create effectively a service account here, let's go ahead and create some secrets. So you can go to certificates and secrets on the left or add a certificate secret on the right. And under client secrets, we're going to create a new client secret. And we're going to give it a name or a description, vRops integration. And we're going to give it an expiration date. I don't know, 24 months. Again, you pick what's appropriate for your security needs. I'll go ahead and hit add. All right, now we get more information. We get a secret ID and a value. So let's go ahead and grab that. We definitely need those here later. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is go into our subscription. So again, within Azure, our investments and our services are managed under subscriptions. So I have one here called Home Lab 1 that I'm going to leverage for this. And I'm going to grab this subscription ID so that I can help direct vRops to where we're going. As well as I'm going to go into this access control. And I'm going to give permission for that app registration to actually leverage or look at resources within this Home Lab 1 subscription. So let's go ahead and go to role assignments. And I'm going to add a new role assignment. And we just need the reader permissions. So let's leave it at that. Go to next. And I'm going to assign this to my app registration here. So let's do TAM Lab. There we go. I'll select that. There we go. Apologize. Review and assign, review and assign. And so at this point, once this refreshes, you'll see here that my app here, the vRops integration, has been assigned the reader permission, or the reader role, excuse me. So that's all we need to do here. So let's go back into Aria Operations and configure the Azure integration. So again, back to integrations, we'll go to Add Account, Microsoft Azure. Okay. There we go. And let's start copying some information over. Now with Azure, just like AWS, we can actually filter on the services that we're going to monitor. For this, I'm going to go ahead and keep all services. Similarly, all regions. I'll keep it as all regions, but you can actually filter this down as well. And let's go ahead and pick my credential. I'll do my TAM Lab. Let's edit those. It's going to ask for a couple things here. And then again, similarly, we can open up advanced settings, and I'm going to go ahead and disable actions because again, the role that I picked was the reader role, which doesn't have any ability to affect change on Azure. So let's go ahead and hit validate connection. And there we go. So the credentials work for Azure. So let's go ahead and hit OK and then hit add. So this is actually creating the integration and starting to do some collection. All right, so we've given the AWS integration a little bit of time to finish its initial polling. And so here we are. We can see that the AWS integration is showing as status OK, and then Azure as well, status of OK. Now let's go ahead and take a look under administration, collection status, and we can get a couple more details. So you notice Azure is showing as collecting, and down here, AWS is collecting as well. And for each one of these different integrations, you can click it and a pane opens up on the right, and you can get some more details about the number of objects being collected and how long it took for the most recent collection. So this is great to validate that the services are talking, but let's go ahead and take a look at some of the information being pulled in. So we'll do that by going over to visualize and then dashboards. And then under manage, we'll see a list of the different dashboards available. And again, with these integrations, it brings along dashboards, views, and reports, as well as a lot of metrics, so you can create your own. So these are the out-of-the-box AWS and Azure dashboards. So if we take a quick look here at the Azure inventory, my environment is not very exciting. You'll see that here very prominently, but you can see that I have my subscription. I'm in the West US2 region, and my home lab is my resource group. And if we scroll through, you'll see some ones poking out. Like I do have a single Azure disk. I have a single public IP, single virtual machine with a single virtual network, and a single virtual network interface. So this is all accurate to my environment, similar to AWS. But the interesting one here is not so much these dashboards themselves, but how can you actually tie them together into something that's a little more meaningful. So I created a custom dashboard when I was presenting at VMworld 2 conferences ago. Specifically, I was presenting on our NSX Advanced Load Balancer and how it was deployed on-prem, in Azure, and AWS as well. And so I needed a dashboard to show me what the current state of my different infrastructures were, the service engines, the controller, and the different virtual machines I had in those various environments. So I created a dashboard. With these integrated together, I was able to do this. And it's very subtle, right? Like it's not gonna, rock your world, but you can see here that I have VPN connectivity between my Azure environment and my home lab. So I have these 2 open VPN endpoints that I was monitoring, as well as a virtual machine in Azure and then another virtual machine on EC2 in AWS. And so for each one of these, I was able to actually, just click through and understand, is this thing turned on? How much disk and memory is it using? So that when it came time for my presentation, I could trust that, yes, my infrastructure is ready for me to do the thing that I needed to do. And with that, let's go ahead and call it. Again, we went through AWS and we went through Azure. We created all of the security permissions such that we could feed that into Aria Operations and truly go multi-cloud. Right? We went multi-cloud, for my example, to make sure that my VMworld infrastructure was working, an application and a service that I needed to be available that spanned across multiple clouds. So hopefully this helps you better understand the art of the possible and help you go multi-cloud in your environment. Thanks so much for your time.